Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology. And this time, I wanted to talk to you about the lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces on August 28th. There are two types of eclipses in astrology. There's a solar eclipse, and then there's a lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse takes place during a full moon at night, when the Earth passes between the sun and the moon, casting its shadow over the moon. Sometimes the moon can turn its color to a sort of coppery brown or an orange. At other times, it can appear like a very sharp, bloody red, something that could be very frightening to look at in the sky if you didn't know what was happening. Solar eclipses are associated with a radical change in life direction. You're kind of going along your way, minding your own business, and then all of a sudden something happens in which you have to veer off the road that you've been traveling and travel a whole different road altogether. A lunar eclipse is about the road that has been traveled. It's about what has come before and making your peace or accepting with what has come before. Maybe what has come before has been associated to things that didn't work out. And so you have to come to some kind of acceptance about things not working out. Or maybe what's come before is a situation you've wanted to be free of. And so a lunar eclipse would indicate a period of time in which you may be released from a prior obligation, a responsibility, or an incredibly tedious job. So how do we go ahead and read a lunar eclipse in astrology? A lunar eclipse marks a time when things unravel or they fall apart. Okay, now that doesn't sound really reassuring, things unraveling or falling apart. What exactly is unraveling and falling apart, Christopher? Youth wants to know. Well, basically, it's this idea that something that has been held together, maybe by spitting glue, or maybe it's outstayed its welcome, or it's worn at the edges, just sort of gives away. It just kind of unravels and it falls apart. It doesn't have the vibrancy, the strength, and the resolve that it did before. Now, as I said, this might sound a little bit alarming, but it doesn't have to be negative, actually. What I want you to do is think of a snake that's shedding its skin. As a snake grows, their skin does not grow with them, which is why snakes periodically shed their outer layer of skin. It's in order to accommodate their increasing size. It's no different from a crab, per se, that's outgrown its shell, or a plant that's outgrown its pot. When things unravel or they fall apart during a lunar eclipse, it's because its time has passed. And like deadwood in nature, deadwood needs to be cleared. It needs to be cleared in order to make way for new growth. Now, the lunar eclipse on August 28th is especially important because it's the last lunar eclipse of the Virgo Pisces eclipse cycle, which has been going on for the last 2 years. And since the North Node was traveling through the zodiac sign of Pisces, that means this eclipse is meant to free you from past habits and past patterns that no longer serve you in your life. Now, you might not see it that way. In fact, some of the things leaving your life may be fixtures that you thought would last forever. But if you keep in mind that this is happening in order to clear away the dead wood, in order to make way for growth, then this may help you to move forward into this new chapter of your life. If you're born under Aries, or you have Aries rising, this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces marks the end of a very strange and a very long interlude in your life. In fact, it marks the end of a period of time where you have felt very much at sea. If you think back to where you were a year and a half ago, it's probably a very different place than where you find yourself now. Neptune rules over the ocean, and Neptune is one of the planetary rulers of Pisces. Travel over the ocean is very different from travel over the land. And being an Aries or an Aries rising, you have a tendency to favor the land more than the sea. The reason for that is that you want to know where you're going. You want to journey along a path, you want to target an aim or a goal, and you want to go ahead and achieve it. When Neptune energy is strong, when Pisces energy is strong in your chart, like it has been for the last year and a half, you can feel adrift, at sea, like where you're trying to go keeps changing or shifting, that you don't really have a clear idea of where it is that you're trying to go or where you are going to land. And in some ways, you might feel like you've washed ashore on some sort of island or place that's, as I said, very different from where you set out to go a year and a half ago. But you're also closing a very important chapter of your life. You're also coming to the end of a very important journey or adventure. What this has to do with is the lunar eclipse taking place in that part of your solar chart that deals with self-undoing and hidden enemies. Now, this always sounds a little bit ominous when we describe it as astrologers, but there's a little bit more to the 12th house than that. I mean, indeed, it is true that the 12th house was associated with hidden enemies. You have to remember that astrology has been around for 2,500 plus years. And so you could have a hidden enemy, like someone maybe sprinkling poison in your food so that when you took a bite out of it, you fell flat on your face and you passed away. You didn't know that they had snuck in and done something behind your back. Now, that's not what's happening to you right now, obviously, but what it may bring the feeling of is this sense that you can't really trust people, or you've gone through a period of time where you weren't sure if you could trust people. This period of time that the North Node was moving through Pisces might have made you feel very on edge, like you weren't really connecting to people in the way that felt comfortable or in a way that felt familiar. This period of time that the North Node was traveling through Pisces might have been a period of time that also put you into contact, maybe even confrontation with parts of yourself that were maybe a little bit along the lines of self-sabotaging, patterns of behavior that weren't really serving you in the end. So this idea of self-undoing, the modern version of that would be maybe self-sabotaging patterns of behavior. And this might have come as much of a surprise to you as it did to other people in your life. Another thing that you might have struggled with during the last year and a half might have been this feeling of confronting things from your past, but not your own past, but maybe even the past of your family. I will often refer to the 12th house in an astrological reading as being the house of epigenetics. And epigenetics deals with this idea of a trauma that might have taken place in a generation before yours, or 2 or 3 generations before yours, and which sort of like set the ball rolling or set the narrative going in your family's life. For instance, let's say your family faced hardship in a previous generation. And even though you might have been raised in a family in which hardship wasn't really something that you were looking at, that feeling of hardship, that sense that things could suddenly go south, might have always been in the background. The 12th house can also be connected to things like depression or alcohol abuse or drug abuse. And so these might also have been themes that had run through your family prior to you and themes that you had to deal with. Now, as you can tell from what I'm describing, the 12th house isn't exactly a cherry spot. And it does have that reputation in traditional astrology. But the 12th house wasn't just about facing all of these negative things from your past. The 12th house also had a reputation, thanks to Marsilio Ficino, the Neoplatonist, of a spirituality or a growth of the soul. Sometimes when we have a lot of activity going through the 12th house, we want to turn our back on the world. We don't feel like we belong in the world or like the people in our lives get us. And so we turn our back on the world and we seek something more spiritual. We seek something more soulful. We seek something more profound. And so this might have also been something that you were experiencing over the last year and a half. The 12th house in astrology famously ruled over monasteries and convents, places of spiritual retreat. And nowadays it rules over things like ashrams or a meditation center, a place that you go to be quiet, to be away from the world. Indeed, it was Dante who associated the 12th house with higher education, but not the higher education that you got at university, but the higher education of profound reflection, of profound thought, perhaps reflecting on a piece of scripture or reflecting on a piece of spiritual writing. Maybe it's poetry, maybe it's music, maybe it's something that moves you from another culture, and really sort of touching base with your soul again and getting more of a connection to your soul and your soul purpose. Now, on one hand, this might sound inviting, maybe even refreshing and restorative. But then on the other hand, you are born under Aries and you have Aries rising. So there can also be a kind of frustration or a restlessness with this being away from the world or this being away from the action. There might have been part of you which is like, okay, I sort of understand that I'm going into a reflective period of time, but there are a lot of things that I have to do in the world. There are a lot of things that have to get done. And I can't just sort of like hang out here and be like this for a while. And so that might also have been what was going on with you in your life as you struggled with these things. But I think the main struggle and perhaps the main journey was in you separating yourself from everything that has come before in your life. As I said, that might have been things that had happened in your family generationally, but it also might have been you separating yourself from who you used to be in your life or what you used to do in your life. And so, as I said, this might have been both a restorative time for you, but it also might have been a very restless time for you, as you might have been rather anxious to go ahead and get on with the new part of your life. Another way that the lunar eclipse in Pisces might be working with a certain planet that's traveling through your zodiac sign right now is Saturn. Right now, you have Saturn in your own zodiac sign. And so what you've been feeling with Saturn in your sign is somewhat similar to some of the themes that I've been talking about with this lunar eclipse. You may feel like what used to work for you before doesn't work for you anymore. You may feel that you have a tremendous weight or sense of responsibility or burdens or obligations on your shoulders right now, and that you're alone with this, that you're the one who's carrying this, that no one really understands what you have to put up with or what you have to carry on your back, carry on your shoulders. Other people might ask to, help carry the burden, but you're like, no. And you don't want to separate with it simply because they don't get it, or you're the only person who can handle this responsibility, either voluntarily or involuntarily. So what might be interesting to sort of think about during this period of time of the lunar eclipse in Pisces is your relationship to duty and your relationship to weakness. Saturn in your sign will point out the things that aren't working in your life and that need to go. Saturn in your sign can also point out your Achilles heel or your one area of weakness and vulnerability. That could trigger the Aries part of you to ignore that or to power through that or to feel like this responsibility or this burden that you're carrying, you're duty bound to do it. And so you're not going to take it off your shoulders at all. That's fine if this responsibility or duty were just going to last a few weeks or a couple of months, but Saturn is in your sign for another year. And so it's going on for a longer period of time. And so what this lunar eclipse in Pisces might be asking you to do is to get to know your vulnerabilities, to get to know your limits, and to take care of them, not to power through them, but to take a care with them, to be sensitive to them, to not isolate yourself so much, to maybe reach out to people that you trust, or maybe even reach out to someone that you feel gets what it is that you're going through. And as this lunar eclipse in Pisces brings to an end a period of time where you felt adrift, and not really sure of where you're going, a period of time in which you will feel solid ground underneath your feet again, I want you to be mindful about those parts of your behavior, those behavior patterns that haven't served you very well. And this is the time to get rid of them, to treat them like that dead wood that I was talking about earlier, to make way for new growth. But this new growth that it's making way for is vulnerability. It's an openness to life and living, not to the possibilities and the alternatives of life and living, the different roads you can go down. No, it's an openness to life and living, which is based on vulnerability, which is based on being connected to your soul, which is based on drawing upon a knowledge of yourself that is not what you had before. You don't have to be tough. You don't have to be rough. You don't have to cover over those weak spots in your life. In fact, what you might want to do is lead with those weak spots in your life, because instead of being things that you felt like you had to compensate for or apologize for, these weak spots, these vulnerabilities might be opening you to connections that are very deep with other people, connections that are very profound with other people, and connections that you might find very soulful and fulfilling on a deep level that you have never experienced before. If you're born under Taurus, or you have Taurus rising, this lunar eclipse in Pisces that's taking place on August 28th is going to be a wonderful time for you. This lunar eclipse takes place in this part of your solar chart that is associated to hopes, wishes, and your friends in high places. Now, it's been said by Firmicus Maternus that if you want to see the fulfillment of your hopes and wishes, you better be connected to friends in high places, friends who can help you to achieve those hopes and wishes, either because they know someone who can open up doors for you, or they're in a position to maybe get you a backer or a sponsor of some sort. Indeed, any sort of planet that's traveling through the solar 11th acts as a kind of mentor or a mentoring energy. It can also be a sponsor or someone who looks out after your greater good. It might be someone who has a stronger sense of where you're going in your life than you do, someone who elevates you deliberately or maybe even perhaps by accident. And the film that immediately comes to mind when I think of the 11th house is My Fair Lady, based on the play Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw. In a nutshell, the plot is like this. There's this professor. His name is Henry Higgins, and he's a professor of elocution. That means basically speech, or rather speaking correctly. And his mission is to teach Englishmen to speak correctly their English language. And he's driven to distraction by the way people are messing up the language with all their different accents and pronunciations and things like this. He has a friend named Colonel Pickering, and Colonel Pickering is just as committed to Professor Henry Higgins' mission as Professor Henry Higgins is. One night at the opera, these two gentlemen meet a flower girl. Her name is Eliza Doolittle, and she speaks with a very heavy Cockney accent, and she's going through the crowd trying to sell flowers to people, and no one's really interested in buying them. And Pickering turns to Higgins and he says, "There, I want to see if you can turn that flower girl into a lady. In other words, that you could teach her to speak as a lady in high society." And Higgins says to Pickering, that's an interesting wager, but let's go ahead and up the ante a bit. 6 weeks from now, there's going to be a big ball celebrating the ambassador of Hungary. Let's say that we take her to this ball and we pass her off as a woman of society. And let's see if we can fool everyone into believing that that is who she is indeed. And Pickering is like, wonderful idea. I will wager you X amount of pounds that you can't do this. And Higgins said, I can absolutely do it. Let's take her back to my home, scrub her up, and start her education in elocution. And that's what they do. They basically kidnap Eliza Doolittle. They take her back to Higgins's home. They scrub her clean, and they basically start turning her into a lady by teaching her how to speak correctly and how to comport herself and how to have social conversation with people from a much higher class than her own. Now, at first, Eliza isn't really sure she wants to do this, and she even resists and wants to run away, but she becomes intrigued by this. She likes that there's a beautiful house that she's in. She likes that she's being served all of these meals, and she actually starts to like training for this exercise of passing herself off as a lady. Plus, she's also being paid rather handsomely as well. Well, fast forward 6 weeks, and she appears as this lady, this mysterious woman that no one knows where she came from at this extraordinary ball. And everyone is taken with her beauty, they're taken with her poise, and they're taken with her elegance. And indeed, I think the Prince of Hungary even wants to dance with her and does, so she's the talk of the town and all these sorts of things. And so basically, Higgins succeeds at his experiment. This might be sort of what you're feeling right now in your life. Maybe a year and a half ago, someone took you under their wing, or someone showed you the ropes of a new situation that you had entered into. Or maybe someone took on some kind of mentor role for you, in which they had a clearer idea of where you were going in your life than you. They might have seen in you potential that was untapped. They might have seen a talent or an ability, something that if it was polished up, like a diamond in the rough, would be allowed to shine and to gleam. And maybe you've gotten to the point where you've done that, where you've cleaned up your act, where you've mastered these skills, where you've taken a talent or ability that you didn't really think much of, or you didn't think that you might be very successful at, and you've really polished it. You've really committed yourself to it. You've really made something of yourself. And you've come to that part in the story where, okay, the bet has been won. You've done this mentorship or this internship, and what's next? In the case of Eliza in My Fair Lady, Professor Higgins, being the sort of fellow that he is, not really fraternizing with people, and his social skills are really rather backward, just assumes that Eliza is going to be thrown out on the street and she can take care of herself, that she can go and make something of herself in the world. His project is done, he's won the bet, and that's it. And it's Pickering and the other members of the household who are like, you can't just do that. You've taken this woman, you've taken her out of the streets, you've made something of her, you've educated her, and you can't just toss her on out or anything along those lines. And Higgins, of course, is like, well, why not? And so what happens here, and it's a very powerful moment in the film, but an even more powerful moment in the play, is Eliza really steps forward into herself. Not only does she say, well, I can take care of myself, and she marches out of Higgins's house. And in fact, when she leaves, Higgins is like, where'd she go? And he goes in pursuit of her. But not only does she have different suitors, but she's decided that she's going to set herself up as a teacher of elocution. And she's going to become competition for Professor Henry Higgins. Okay, so this woman who had like no prospects, who was selling flowers, who, had a face smudged with dirt and was going nowhere in her life fast, suddenly steps into everything that she is, and she claims ownership of it. She doesn't need a Professor Higgins anymore. She can make her own way. She's already making social connections and things along those lines. Plus, there's a very wealthy man who's very much in love with her. So she basically has a variety of choices here, and she can support herself. And that might also be what's going on in your life right now. You may find yourself after a year and a half, maybe of some mentorship under someone or something along those lines, that you don't really owe this person anymore. You don't have to be under their wing anymore. You might not even need their help anymore, and that you can make your own way. And so what's nice, because this lunar eclipse in Pisces forms a sextile to your zodiac sign of Taurus, is that there's a parting of the way, but there's parting of the way that's gentle. It's nice. It's on good terms. You've done this period of time with someone's mentorship or sponsorship, and now you can take care of yourself. And instead of this person feeling maybe enmity or jealousy or even competition, instead what you're going to be feeling is tremendous support. And if it's not coming from a sponsor or a mentor, you're going to be feeling it maybe in your community or the people who have really been behind a new direction that you've taken in your life. So this period of time of the lunar eclipse on August 28th is a recognition of how far you've come, and also a recognition of how capable and how talented you are, and that now you can proceed on your own steam and resources. If you're born under Gemini or you have Gemini rising, this lunar eclipse in Pisces will take place at the uppermost part of your solar chart, that part of your solar chart that's called the midheaven, which is responsible for your career, your destiny, or your high status in life. This is a very powerful point for you. And the reason it's such a powerful point for you is because there's been so much activity in your midheaven for a number of years. Not only did you have the North Node traveling through your midheaven for the last year and a half, but you also had Saturn in your midheaven from March of 2023 until earlier this year in 2026. And even then, if we take a couple of steps back, you've had Neptune in your midheaven since about 2012 or 2013. So there has been a lot of planetary activity in your midheaven, a lot of planetary activity that's been moving you forward to go and realize your destiny, to go and realize your career, to go and realize yourself to your greatest potential. There's been a lot of realization that's been taking place. But now that the North Node has moved out of that 10th house, and now that Saturn is no longer there and Neptune is no longer there either, you're going to find yourself basically standing on top of the mountain that you've been scaling for such a long period of time. And you're going to be asking yourself, has this delivered everything that I've wanted it to deliver? In other words, I've been through the long climb. I've done a lot of striving, but now that I've arrived, is this really what I want? Is this really what I saw for myself? Has it delivered on all of these things that I made so many sacrifices for and I worked so hard for? Now, if the answer is yes, all right, then this is the period of time to recommit. It's the period of time to reinvest your energy, to reinvest your finances, to make this a priority that it was, but not a priority in terms of scaling the mountain and trying to achieve the prize, but a priority in terms of sustainability. Now that you've reached the top, now that you've reached the peak, how do you sustain yourself at this elevated height? How do you get to know your contemporaries and your peers right now? And how do you make this career of yours or this accomplishment of yours last and continue in your life? Now, let's say you've gotten to this peak in your life. You've climbed up the ladder and gotten to the highest point that you can in your career or area of expertise or in what you set out to do. And you have this feeling of like, well, I've accomplished everything that I've set out to do. So you might be wondering, what comes next? Now, this might be a question that you're sort of keeping to yourself, or you don't really want to think about, or maybe it's something that you do feel comfortable discussing with friends and loved ones and acquaintances and things like that. You're born under Gemini or Gemini rising. So being able to talk to other people about this is something that's very important for you as well. But let's say you came and did everything that you wanted to do, and you're not feeling really that connected to this anymore. Then you might find yourself in a bit of a predicament of having climbed up a tree to the uppermost branch and not knowing how to climb back down again. And this can create a bit of a predicament for you, but this could open up another kind of journey or another path for you as well. If you are feeling that you have done everything that you've set out to do, and this is a good thing, and that you kind of want to climb back down and maybe reacquaint yourself with the life that's been making all of the sacrifices for you to get to where you're going, or maybe you want to climb back down and travel a different path, then this would be the time to do it. All right. Now, you don't just sort of like announce it and go ahead and do that right now. But what you might be doing is sort of putting out feelers, seeing what other people think, where other people are with such a thing. Maybe you're in a place where you name a successor. Maybe you're in a place where you ask people to conduct a search for someone who's going to replace you. Or maybe you just sort of set up someone that you yourself have been mentoring in some sort of way, and they're going to take over for what you've been doing, allowing you to sort of leave this and go on to something different. So the thing is, just because you've put all of this energy into working hard and sacrificing a lot to get to where you are right now, doesn't mean that you have to stay there if you don't want to. Remember that you're born under Gemini. And if you're born under Gemini or you have Gemini rising, then it's all about choice. It's all about trying something different. And if you feel like you've said everything you had to say, if you feel like you've done everything you've had to do, go ahead and try something different. It's not going to shock people. They're not going to be like, oh no, or anything along those lines. If you do it by presenting yourself as working around with a new idea, you might find people being like, wow, you've got a new idea. You've got a fresh take on something. I want to hear all about it. Okay, so this is something that Geminis can do. This idea of like, I'm working with this new idea, this different approach, this new path that I want to take. You can automatically get lots of people on your side, lots of people who are supportive of this. And you may even get a couple of people who want to come along for the ride, who want to journey right alongside you. So don't feel like you have to continue something that you don't feel like continuing. All you have to do is find a way to climb back down that tree, to tell people that you want to try something new and different. And instead of people looking at you askance, you might find themselves being really excited and really thrilled about what you have up your sleeve and what you want to try next. If you're born under Cancer or you have Cancer rising, this lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to be a wonderful time for you. The reason why it's going to be a wonderful time for you is because Pisces is a water sign, just like Cancer is a water sign. And so these two zodiac signs form a trine to one another. A trine basically means that the two zodiac signs get one another. They get one another to such an extent that they are totally simpatico. In other words, one sign supports the other sign in their endeavor. There's unconditional love, there's unconditional support, and both signs are working together to bring out the best in both of them, to realize their biggest aspirations and to fulfill their greatest dreams. So with this lunar eclipse that's taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces, this is marking an end of a period of time in which the North Node has been traveling through Pisces. But the North Node isn't the only thing that's been traveling through Pisces. Saturn was in Pisces from March of 2023 until earlier this year in 2026. And even then, Neptune was in Pisces. Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Pisces in 2012 or 2013 or thereabouts. And so Neptune was also in the zodiac sign of Pisces for a prolonged period of time. And so perhaps for a prolonged period of time, you have been away. You've been involved in a journey that might have taken you away from your home or your family or the things that were familiar to you. Now, I'm not saying that you were like Odysseus, who was away from Ithaca for 20 years, but it might have been something in which maybe you were away not for that prolonged period of time. I mean, I think there's about 14 years with the Neptune and Pisces. I'm not saying that you were away for 14 years, but for maybe 14 years, or at least in the past 4 to 5 years, there was a feeling of being on the road or being away or having obligations at a distance that called you to leave or to travel. Maybe they weren't just obligations. Maybe they were also opportunities and offers, things that you couldn't resist, things that you wanted to go out and do, things that you wanted to go and become. And so there's been a lot of away from maybe your home or your family. or maybe a lot of away from the city that you live in. Maybe your apartment or flat or home was more something that you would return to for a couple of nights and then you would be back on the road again, something along those lines. So with this lunar eclipse that's taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces, this is bringing an end to all of that. It doesn't mean that you're at the end of traveling, but you're at the end of traveling and journeying so much. And so it's bringing an end to it in terms of maybe having fulfilled what you needed to fulfill, or perhaps even coming around full circle. It's kind of like a transfer student returning home from studying in another country, and they're coming back home, and maybe they're coming back home with skills and abilities that they went away to study or to gain, or they're coming back home with experiences and an education to share, or they're coming back home because they simply wanted to return back home and do something for their community again. This might be a period of time in which you're returning to maybe an old haunt or the neighborhood, or to an apartment that you've sublet, or to a house that you rented, okay? But you're coming back home and you're taking up residence in your life again. That you are maybe even taking up residence with your family, the family that you were raised in again. Now, there's a saying, which is, you can't go home again. And that's a phrase that people born under Cancer or who have Cancer rising hate hearing. Okay, the idea of you can't go home again, that's awful. Of course you can go home again, and I'm going to prove it. But I think what that phrase was meant to communicate is that you can go home again physically, but it's not going to be what you left. It's going to be a very different place. And so when you come back and you re-inhabit something or some place that you used to inhabit before, you're going to notice that people have changed. Life went on. Now it didn't go on without you. You might have had a whole bunch of people waiting for you to come back, but life went on. So you might be returning home to a situation that feels familiar, but is different from what it was when you left. Everyone's different, and you're different as well. So this might be a period of time of you finding your place again. Where are you in the family right now? Where are you with the neighborhood right now? Where are you vis-a-vis people that you used to work with or people that were your neighbors? Who's living next to you right now? Is it the same person or is it someone new? Okay, so there's a lot of this adjusting that might be taking place right now. But on a deeper level, this adjusting might also have to do with you stepping into a role more fully than you've ever really embraced before. Let's say you're coming home to your biological family. Let's say you're coming home to a house that you were raised in, where you're not a child anymore. Part of you might respond like that, but you're not a child anymore. You're an adult, or you're the sum of your experiences away. And so you might find yourself taking on new responsibilities right now. You might find yourself having more of a say than you did before. Or let's say you've been away studying or working or something along those lines, and you've come back, and you might find that people are looking at you like, well, show us what you've learned or show us what you can do. And you might feel a little bit on the spot if you're born under Cancer or Cancer rising, a little bit like, yeah, I learned these things, but give me some time to sort of adjust and figure out where I am and work all of this out. And so this is an interesting time for you. It's a return, but it's not going back. Okay, so it's a return from where you've been, but it's not picking up where you left off. So there are a lot of new things that you need to learn about the people around you, about yourself in this environment, about the new responsibilities and perhaps obligations that you're taking on. And what's going to be interesting for you during this period of time with this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces is that you may find that it's not as easy to take on that old role again, or you may find that you want to wear that role very differently. You might even be expressing parts of yourself that you never felt that you could express before. And you might be expressing parts of yourself that instead of being rejected, are actually accepted, embraced, welcomed, and supported. This is the beauty, again, of what I was saying about that lunar eclipse taking place in a zodiac sign that trines yours. This is such an important time for you. It's such an important time for you because you're a water sign. You're a water sign, and we're living under a sky which is very new from the way that it's been before. We're living under a sky in which the slower moving planets are all in air and fire signs. So in essence, what you're doing right now is that you're carrying the water. Okay, you're carrying in your being those memories, those feelings, that sense of intimacy, that sense of bonding, that sense of belonging. You are carrying that in your life right now. You may feel like you're surrounded by people who are moving on fast forward, that they're very restless, that they're very jumping from thing to thing, that they don't have a memory of things. They don't really have true focus. Everything is so sped up and accelerated. And you might feel like this is a very different world that I'm living in right now. And it is. But the thing is, when you're carrying water like you are, then you're carrying the memory of people. You're reminding them in the presence, when they're in your presence, of how to be watery. And so instead of feeling afraid and anxious of being out of your element, or like you're going to evaporate or dry up, that you're going to suffer some sort of psychic drought or anything like that, know that your water recycles itself. It comes back again and again and again. And so now you're going to stand out in a way that you haven't stood out for a very long time. You're going to stand out like sort of, I don't know, like an oasis in the desert, that people who are living under this very sort of, at times, dry sky, see in you a reservoir. They see in you a place of peace. They see in you a person that they can be with and that they can feel themselves again with, that they're refreshed and they're restored by your presence. So when I say that you're carrying water, it's not a canteen. You're carrying water like a cloud carries water, and that this water is recycling itself. It never stops. It's like the water cycle. It's there without limit. You have this ability. And so maybe in the past few years, that was maybe something you kept more to yourself or was more behind the scenes. Now you can lead with your watery presence, and people will find succor with you. They'll find comfort with you. And you will be forming these bonds that you've been looking for effortlessly and easily as you come to be known as the oasis in everyone else's life. If you're born under Leo or you have Leo rising, this lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to be strangely uplifting for you. Now, I don't mean uplifting in a fiery or an air way, and we've spoken a lot about the elements of fire and air lately. They trine and sextile yours, and you have this energy coursing through your horoscope right now. This energy that I'm talking about is a watery energy, and particularly it's an oceanic energy. And we always speak of the ocean when we're speaking about the zodiac sign of Pisces. What you might be experiencing during this lunar eclipse is an end of a very long period of time where you have felt adrift, where you have felt like you didn't really belong in any place that you wound up. Think of a sailor who's sailing from one port of call to another port of call. That might have been what you were experiencing. You might have been traveling during the past year and a half or a few years. You might have been abroad. You might have been somewhere else during a period of time. And you might have felt a longing to get back to your life, but you didn't know what that life that you were trying to get back to was, especially. So you might have felt lost. You might have felt adrift. And you might have felt even a sort of encroaching melancholia in your life. This feeling like you weren't really connecting to people, that you weren't really bonding with people. I mean, you would see people again, just like a sailor revisiting a port of call. It's nice to see Melanie and it's nice to see Frank again, but you were passing through or you're going somewhere else. And so that feeling of belonging wasn't very strong. Now, let's say you're one of those Leos or Leo risings in which you haven't done any traveling at all. You've been staying put. You might have been experiencing in your life an emotional drift, okay? This feeling of not feeling bound to the people in your life emotionally, like your friends didn't feel as close as they once did, that your loved ones were maybe leaving your life or changing stations in your life or going through different things, and you might not have felt as connected to them. You might even have felt like nobody really got you or nobody really understood you. And as a Leo or Leo rising, this is not a good place to be. All right. When you're born under Leo, or if you have Leo rising, your ruling planet is the sun. Okay. And we've spoken a lot about the sun vis-a-vis you in recent weeks, particularly with Jupiter coming into your zodiac sign and the recent solar eclipse in your own zodiac sign of Leo. When you have a ruling planet, which isn't a planet, but is actually a star, what the sun does in life is the same thing that it does in a horoscope. It brings heat and it brings light and it brings life. The sun enlivens. All right, so the sun has a set course. There's a sunrise, it travels across the sky, it's sunset, it's nighttime, and then the sun rises on a new day. Okay, and as a Leo or Leo rising, you have a similar set course in your life. So this idea of not really feeling connected to people might have been a bit of a secret, something that you kept to yourself. You know, you might have gone through the motions of like, oh, it's so great to see you and what's up and all this, you know, but on the inside, behind the scenes of that glowing face, that wonderful smile of yours, might have been someone who felt very lonely, who felt very adrift, and who felt very not connected. So the good news of this lunar eclipse in Pisces and why you might experience it as being uplifting is that you're not going to feel that heaviness, that hard to describe melancholy, that feeling that you don't really fit or that you don't really belong. You're going to feel that leaving your life. It's going to be sort of like an overcast day in which the clouds have finally parted and the sun is shining again. So that's what I mean by uplifting. But at the same time, I want you to reflect on the past year and a half, on what was going on with you, this feeling of adrift. Sometimes when we feel like we have to have a set course in our life, the feeling of adrift is, like I said, something you keep to yourself. You don't really share with anyone. Maybe you didn't even really want to act on, or maybe it was spurring you to go from one relationship to another or one job to another, something along those lines. You haven't arrived at where you want to be yet. That's still a little ways off for you, but you are at a place where you're reconnecting to your heart again, and you're reconnecting to who you are again. But who you are might not fit in the setting where you find yourself right now. There are a lot of things that are still open questions in your life. You know, you're looking at yourself, you're looking at your attitudes. Perhaps you're even examining your fears and your biases on a deeper level than you've examined them before, or you're at least open to those possibilities. With the nodes now moving into Aquarius and Leo, you're entering a much more engaged and engaging time in your life in which you're dealing with these issues in conversation, you're dealing with them in a relationship, you're dealing with them in your acquaintances, you're dealing with them in your day-to-day life. And you may be feeling that you really are kind of out of sync with a lot of things. And so this period of time that you're coming out of where you felt adrift, let that inform you. Let yourself be open, at least with yourself, if not other people. Let yourself be open with yourself that you don't have the answers. You're not really sure where you're going, and that you're open to suggestions. You're open to input. This is something that's not always easy for someone born under Leo or Leo rising to do. You're supposed to be the queen or the king. You're supposed to know better. You're supposed to know these things. And so letting yourself be open to other people's input, letting yourself be open to other people's ideas, this is a different thing for you. If you're born under Leo or have Leo rising, this is a different mode. This is a different way of thinking, and it's a different way of feeling. But I think what you have gained from this period of time of sort of being adrift and journeying to other shores or other relationships or other situations, and now sort of being back on track with your life, but you don't necessarily have the same place of departure or the same place of destination, that you're very open to all of this. I think this is going to allow you to form more profound connections, deeper connections to people. It's going to allow you to really sort of choose the people that you want to be in your life, not based on loyalty or who supports you, but people that you feel really engage you, people that maybe challenge you, but people who also support you. And so this is opening your heart, and this is opening your mind in a lot of different ways. You're not at the end of it yet. You still have a few more years with this, but I think you're going to find the journey changing. Instead, where it was a feeling of you didn't know where you were going, now you don't really know where you're going, but you've been to a lot of different places. You have a lot of stamps on your passport. You have a lot of stamps on your luggage. You're informed with a lot of your experiences, and let those experiences guide you. You're a fire sign after all, and fire signs are very much about their experiences and the wealth of their experiences. And I think that you're going to find that even if you don't know where you're going, you know who you are, and that you also know that you're growing during this period of time, and who you're growing into is a very different, but at the same time, a very familiar and wonderful person. If you're born under Virgo or you have Virgo rising, this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to signal the end of what has been a very long journey for you. This journey has probably taken place in the area of relationships. That can be a romantic relationship or a business relationship. You've been through a lot of tests, trials, and tribulations in these different areas of relationship. You've navigated some treacherous whirlpools, made your way gingerly past the snapping jaws of defeat, and maybe experienced being turned into a pig and being turned back to a person again. In any case, you've gone through a lot of transformations and changes in the areas of relationships. So what's happening with this lunar eclipse in Pisces is that it's bringing a close to this odyssey that you've been engaged in. And now you're finding yourself on the other side of it. Now, when we have a lunar eclipse that's taking place opposite our sign, especially when it's dealing with the solar first and the solar seventh houses, oftentimes this can be connected to the end of a long-standing relationship or to the end of a long-standing association. And that might indeed be what you are experiencing right now. But if that's not what you are experiencing right now, let's say you are in a relationship and the two of you have gone through all of this together, then this is the period of time for you to tear up the old scorecard. Yes, the old scorecard. That thing that every person in a relationship has tucked in their back pocket. That scorecard where you keep score of all the grievances, of all the disputes, of all the horrible things that were said to you and that you conveniently forgot that you said in turn. A lot of times when we keep going back to this scorecard, that can bring back old fights, that can bring back old disputes, There's a feeling like your partner isn't allowing you to change, even though you feel like you're being the most open-minded or the most open-hearted person in the world. And you aren't, as long as you carry that scorecard. People need to change. People need to grow. And especially in romantic partnerships where we can have very strong expectations of what our romantic partner should be doing. We can have very strong expectations or defined expectations of them sexually. We can have defined expectations of them romantically. We can have defined expectations in terms of what they should be doing around the house or making our lives a lot better. Okay, so your spouse can be your comrade, your compatriot. And a lot of times the spouse can change and you can change, and you don't really change at the same time. You know, the spouse may grow in ways that you haven't grown yet, or you may grow in ways in which you experience your spouse as prohibiting you to grow or bringing you back to an old role or limiting you in some way. There's a reason why people would often refer to their spouses in the 1950s as their ball and chain. But we live in a very different world right now. We live in a world in which we are equal in our relationships, in which we work together to create a household and a career and that plot of land that we occupy in this world. We also live in a world that has sped up. It's very accelerated right now. It doesn't follow the rules that it used to follow a year and a half ago, or 3 years ago, or 6 years ago. And so there's a lot that you've gone through in your relationship together and maybe even apart at different times. But now it's time to acknowledge the relationship, that you're still here, that you're still rowing on the same boat, that you've got one oar and your spouse has another oar, and that you're rowing hopefully in a direction that's taking you to a better place. So you don't need the scorecard. You don't need the memory of all the grievances and the disputes and who hurt whom and all those sorts of things. Now, I'm not saying that you just sort of like forget it or anything along those lines. And one of the most beautiful things that Pisces has to teach us is forgiveness. Now, forgiveness might be something that we do often, many times a day. We might forgive someone who said something that was cross. We might forgive someone who we had a fight with or dispute or misunderstanding, and that person may forgive us as well. And that's lovely. This is how we get through a day, because not every day are we going to be agreeable, or the people we're going to encounter are going to be agreeable. But the forgiveness that I'm talking about is storing up the grievance. Now, how do you deal with that? You can't just wish it away or say everything's like water under the bridge or anything along those lines, which Pisces, by the way, are pretty good at. What do you want? It's a water sign. But what forgiveness really talks about is, how bound do you want to be to that pain? How bound do you want to be to that anger? How much do you want to allow or permit that grievance, that pain, that anger to dominate your life? That's kind of what forgiveness is talking about. It's not letting the person off the hook. It's not saying, we're good, when you don't feel like you're good. What it's really about is two things. One is, do I want these feelings to dominate my life and to be recycled every time I have a fight or an argument or a disagreement? And the other thing is, can't I put myself in this person's shoes for just a moment, or maybe a few moments, or maybe even an hour? Okay, when you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, then that person isn't so separate from you anymore. That person isn't a stranger. They're like you, but they're wearing different shoes. They're coming from a different background or culture, or just simply a different way of looking at things, a different temperament, a different perspective. We all live in different bodies, which means that everyone has a different perspective than anyone else, all right? So when you work with the idea of, do I want an anger or grievance to dominate my life? And you combine that idea with, can I sort of see why this might have happened from someone else's point of view? It's not moving you into an agreement like, oh, I can see why that person's angry and that's okay. what it is more like is I can see why that person's angry, and maybe that's okay because I'm informed and I understand that and I care about this person and want to help them with their anger. Or I can see why that person's angry and I really don't want that person in my life. Okay. It's like, I don't want to be around that anger. I don't want to be around that bitterness. I don't want to be around those things that really trigger or set that off. And so that, in a bizarre sort of way, can also be a kind of forgiveness. It's an understanding of where that person's coming from, but that doesn't mean that you have to like it or that you have to like that person. What it comes from is more this idea of letting go of what that connection that you had with that person was. Yes, there are people who are going to do horrible things to us, and we may not realize justice. We may feel retribution. We may feel a hurt that we feel like we can never get over. But Pisces is here to remind us that feelings flow, that feelings are connected to emotions. They're connected to the element of water. Water evaporates. It becomes a cloud, which grows heavy with water and rains down on the planet again. Tides go in and out. Currents can be swift and they can be very slow. Water changes its shape. Now, not all of us are capable of the fluidity of a Pisces heart, but we can understand that fluidity. We don't have to become stuck in a grievance or an anger that then begins to corrode our life. We can release ourselves from that bond. A lot of times we can talk about bond in terms of like an emotional bond we have with someone, and we see it as a positive thing, like there's a bond of love, the bond of family, the bond of culture, the bond of community, okay, that feeling of belonging. But a bond can also be something that captures. A bond can also be something that imprisons. We can be bonded to someone through anger or despair or hurt in some way. And do you really want to be the person that keeps carrying that around? You can let that go, which is a very tall order when someone broke your heart, when someone did you harm, when someone took all the money in your bank account. It can be a very tall order. But what Pisces is saying is it's better to let that go, to let that water go, than to keep it pent up in a jar or a jug, to keep it pent up somewhere in your heart and your soul and let it take on a more corrosive thing. You want water to circulate, just like you want air to circulate. These are energies that circulate. You don't want it to grow foul. You don't want it to grow poisonous. And this is what can happen if you don't let something go, if you don't forgive. Again, it doesn't mean that you're letting someone off the hook or anything like that. It means that you're letting it go. If you're in a relationship or an association with someone in which you can't continue, or there's been so much pain or betrayal or whatever, let it go. Forgive them in terms of the idea of they know not what they do, but let's complete that sentence with, and I don't want them to be a part of my life, because I want a life which is loving and which is good, in which I am experiencing those things. But if you feel like you can renew a partnership, and again, this doesn't have to just be romantic. This could be your next door neighbor that you're feuding with, or a colleague at work that you have your differences. But if you feel like you can forgive them, that you can tear up that scorecard, then the person has an opportunity to show you a different side of themselves because you have the perspective of seeing a different side of themselves. You allow them to be different, to be better, to heal, to learn from their mistakes, and they allow you to do the same. And if that's what's going on in a relationship or a friendship or even a professional association, that's the thing that makes that relationship or association and friendship so valuable. Not just the fact that you can forgive one another, but that you allow one another to grow and that your relationship grows, despite the times when you're not on the same page, and in celebration of the times when you are. If you're born under Libra or you have Libra rising, this lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to be an interesting one for you. Now, the reason why I use the word interesting is because you're not really going to quite understand this energy right away, all right? The lunar eclipse is taking place in that part of your solar chart that deals with work, health, and service. Okay, and that can mean a lot of different things. It could actually talk about your own physical health. It could talk about the work that you do, or it could talk about the service that you provide. It can also talk about the way that you regard your life. Have you regarded your life for the last year and a half as being tedious or an obligation or something that you have to do in which your heart isn't really in it? You know, like a job. A job can be something that we have to do for the paycheck. We don't really like it. And we're kind of hoping that something else will happen because we're tired of doing the same old, same old. That might be a comment on your job, on what you're doing right now for a living, but it might also be a comment on how you feel like you're living your life, that you're on automatic pilot, that you're just kind of a hamster on the exercise wheel, running in place, that you're waiting for something to happen or to change the course that you are now traveling. What also might be taking place during this period of time, because it's the last lunar eclipse in the zodiac signs of Virgo and Pisces, is that you might feel like something that's felt like an indentured servitude is coming to an end. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with what indentured servitude is. What it refers to is back in the time of the American colonies, right? You had British citizens who wanted to come over and start again in the colonies of America. But let's say you couldn't afford passage on the ship. Let's say you didn't know what you wanted to do with your life other than get out of Britain and start again in America. Or let's say you didn't have money to build a house or anything along those lines. What you did is that you signed a contract with someone in the colonies who would pay for your expenses to travel overseas on that boat, and who would pay for you to get your trunks and things in order, and you would come and you would live in that person's house. Now, they paid that passage and they paid for you to be able to set yourself up again. In exchange for that payment, you had to work for that person basically until you paid off the money that they essentially loaned you in this contract, in this indentured servitude. And so in some ways, as a Libra or Libra rising, you may feel like for the last year and a half, or maybe even 4 years, that you've been in a sort of indentured servitude, that you have been contracted by someone maybe to work a job or fill a position or something along those lines, that they put out money, and that you had to perform these services without protest, without disagreement, without really a say until you were done fulfilling this period of time when you're paying someone back. Now, that could be paying someone back financially, or that can be paying someone back emotionally or karmically, basically paying for them having covered your expenses or maybe even your follies for a period of time. And so what this lunar eclipse in Pisces shows is that you're coming to the end of that time in your life. And when you come to the end of a period of time where you are ending an obligation or a responsibility or even a debt, there can be on one hand a terrific sense of freedom, okay? But then on the other hand, there can be like, what do I do now? Like, I'm really on my own resources. Have I saved up enough money to go out on my own? Can I really stand on my own 2 feet? So these might be things that are very much in uppermost in your mind right now, that it's good that you've paid back this money or obligation, or you fulfilled a responsibility or something that was due to someone else. But it does leave the question of, where do you go from here? And so, as I said, this is something that might be uppermost on your mind. Another thing that you might be experiencing if you're born under Libra or you have Libra rising is that you might have gone into a retreat in the last year and a half. Maybe even the last 3 years, you might have sort of retreated from the world, where you didn't really want to have a lot of interaction. You might have become kind of a monk in some way, or a hermit, where you weren't having a lot of interaction with other people. And you might have done this because you were getting over something that was very challenging or very difficult. We did have that eclipse cycle that took place between Aries and Libra, taking place between, I think it was 2022 and 2024. So you might have been getting over what was very tumultuous or tumultuous events that took place between 2022 and 2024. And so there might have been a period of time where you retreated, and now you feel like you've recuperated, like you've gotten better, like you're ready to go out and greet the world again. And so that's why I'm saying that this is an interesting time for you, because you might feel on one hand, happy that you're free and liberated and that you're going back out into the world again. But then on the other hand, you might be feeling like, well, things were so defined before, things were so secure before, when I was working off this indentured servitude, I didn't have to worry about these larger than life issues or questions, or things were fine when I was holed up in my monk's cell, and just really spending time by myself and getting to know myself. Are those things that I realized about myself, those experiences that might have been very soulful, that might have been very spiritual? You might be asking, am I going to lose some of that depth, some of that profundity that I had before? You're not. That's something that you're going to bring with you. But sometimes we need time to adjust. When we've spent a lot of time by ourselves, we need time to adjust to the hectic pace of day-to-day life. Or when we've spent time under someone else's thumb or someone else's patronage or sponsorship, we need time to get a sense of what our standing on our own is about. So I think that if you can allow yourself to have that time to adjust, to check in, to get the lay of the land right now, you're going to find yourself doing a lot better if you wait and study what the world looks like now, rather than feel like you have to pick up right where you left off, or you have to go back to the world with a mission statement or an idea of how you need to do things. Bring that slowness that you were experiencing before, or bring that apartness that you were experiencing before into the world with you. You don't have to leave it back at home, or you don't have to leave it back at that hermit cave that you were living in. Bring that into the world with you so that it informs the way that you look at things. If you do that, I think you're going to find this transition back into the regular hectic pace of life. You're going to find it not to be so overwhelming. It's not going to feel so hectic. Things aren't going to feel like they're happening at you. That you're going to have a sense of what you want to do with your life right now, that you're going to be setting your own priorities, that you're going to still value your away time, but that your away time can also operate in the theater of our everyday life. And I think if you can allow yourself to sort of find your balance again, to regain your equilibrium, not only are you going to enjoy the best that both worlds have to offer, but you're going to find yourself really approaching life from much more in-depth experience and profound place. If you're born under Scorpio, or you have Scorpio rising, this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces on August 28th is going to be a wonderful lunar eclipse for you. What's wonderful about it is you're basically stepping out of one chapter of your life and into another. Remember when I was saying earlier in this forecast, I was talking about a snake shedding its skin? That's very much what you're going to be experiencing nowadays. You have grown as a person, and the skin that you have been wearing, you have outgrown. So that skin is going to shed, it's going to fall off, it's going to reveal the new, more mature, more grown you. So how have you grown? How have you matured? Let's begin with the lunar eclipse in Pisces taking place on August 28th. Pisces is a water sign, just like Scorpio is a water sign, which means that the two signs trine one another. What that means is that you're bound to one another through the element of water, which are emotions, feelings, the soul, and the psyche. This is something that you understand and that Pisces understands on a very deep and profound level. So when you have a lunar eclipse in Pisces, the last lunar eclipse taking place in the Virgo Pisces eclipse cycle, which has lasted roughly the last year and a half to 2 years, when you have that taking place, there's this feeling that you are supported by the energy of Pisces, that Pisces is helping you to move forward into the world. So that basically means you have emotional support, you've got creative support, you've got psychic support, the love of community, home, family, relatives, neighborhood, however that appears in your life. You've got this wonderful support. But the support isn't just a year and a half to 2 years old. In March 2023, we had Saturn in the zodiac sign of Pisces. And so Saturn was there for about 2.5 years, where it was supporting your Scorpio energy. But if we can go back even further, let's go back to Neptune being in the zodiac sign of Pisces. Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Pisces around 2012 or 2013. So you began really experiencing that Piscean support as early as then. Now, did you go through a lot of difficult times and things like that? Yes, probably through the mid-teens. And then again, when Uranus was going through Taurus. But you always had that Piscean support. You always had a planet in Pisces that was supporting you in your growth in the zodiac sign of Scorpio, your emotional growth, your emotional maturity. So with this last lunar eclipse in Pisces taking place on August 28th, it's basically saying that this is the end of the Piscean curriculum, that this is the end of a long period of time where you have been learning the lessons of Pisces in your own life and in your own horoscope. So what does Pisces have to teach a Scorpio? What Pisces has to teach a Scorpio is forgiveness. Now, you're probably going to react with, not that. I will never forgive. Scorpio is famous for never forgetting and never forgiving any sort of slight that has been done to them. And this is something that gives Scorpio a lot of power and a lot of strength in their life. Scorpio is a very curious water sign. The water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. All water signs are by nature emotionally fluid. Let's take Cancer, for instance. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and no planet in the sky changes its appearance more dramatically than the moon does as it moves through all of its lunar phases. The same thing holds true of a Cancer's emotional life. It is in flux. It is fluid. It's changeable. Now, Cancer is still a cardinal sign, so there's still a set course to how those emotions change. But basically what you have with Cancer is a zodiac sign that's very emotional and understands that those emotions can change. They're not fixed. They're not, immovable, and they're not unsympathetic. And then there's Pisces. Pisces is very emotionally fluid. Okay, it's one of its ruling planets is Neptune. Neptune was named after the Roman god of the ocean. So oceans change. They change their color according to the sky. If it's a sunny day, they're a brilliant blue. And if it's a dark and cloudy day, they're gray and gloomy. Oceans change their drift, their current. They change. They're in constant movement. With Scorpio, Scorpio also experiences that fluidity, that emotional change, but Scorpio is ruled by Mars, all right? And so Mars has an insistence. Mars doesn't want to bend. Mars doesn't want to change. Mars doesn't want to relent. Mars doesn't want to yield. So what happens is that Mars wants to dominate, especially since your other ruling planet, Pluto, is also a very dominating planet. Mars wants to dominate. It wants to rise to the challenge. It wants to win. It never wants to lose. And so Scorpio has all the fluidity of water, but its ruling planets turn issues that Scorpio faces in life that are difficult into life or death stakes. Things that a Scorpio is facing in their life, they face with the intensity of win or lose it all. So Scorpios have an emotional life in which their survival depends on their willpower. Okay. And one of the things that fuels the willpower of Scorpio is anger. So Scorpio is a zodiac sign that's the least likely to let somebody off the hook. And Scorpio is a zodiac sign that believes in justice, that people who have done bad things to other people should face the consequences for it. They should be punished. And in conjunction with punishment, they should really understand the pain that they caused someone else. So they should be made to understand how painful they made someone else's life by experiencing that same pain themselves. It can sound very harsh, but that's because people born under Scorpio or who have Scorpio rising have experienced this for themselves. They've experienced injustice. They've experienced betrayal. And they have all the force of an avenging angel when it comes to making sure that they will never experience it again, that nobody that they care about will ever experience it again, and those who are guilty will suffer the punishment of what they have done to the absolute extreme, which is my long way of saying Scorpios don't let anyone off the hook. And this is the relationship to forgiveness. Forgiveness to a Scorpio still sounds like you're saying everything's okay when it's not. Forgiveness to a Scorpio sounds like you're letting someone get away with something. They knew what they did was wrong and they haven't been held to accounts for that. They haven't been held accountable for that. So this is why Scorpio will hold on to that anger. They'll hold on to that injustice. Anger is also associated to Mars in a different way because it gives Scorpio willpower. Scorpio of the water signs have a very powerful willpower. They have a very powerful drive. They will go and get what they want come hell or high water, where the other water signs can sort of be more fluid and go with the flow and stream along. Scorpio's like, not me. Get out of my way. I've got a place to go and something to do. It's very Mars ruled in that regard. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about the curriculum of Pisces? What I'm talking about is that if you are all Mars or if you're all Pluto, you're going to always side with that planetary energy. And those are great planetary energies, by the way. I mean, having a good, strong Mars and a good, strong Pluto in your chart is terrific. But like all ruling planets, they can, after a period of time, narrow your margins. They can narrow your view of things. For instance, you might have learned over a period of time that being angry and feeding off of heartbreak or rejection is something that gave you strength. And what you might have learned over the last 13 years or the last 3 years or the last year and a half is that if you're always angry and if you're always making sure that nobody gets off the hook, your emotional life becomes more narrow. But that's not the only way you would have learned that. Maybe what you've also experienced over the past few years are the lapping waters of Pisces. You might have experienced love coming into your life in ways that were unexpected or unanticipated. This might have been the love of a lover, love of a spouse, the love of a sibling in which maybe you didn't get along before and you do now, or love of sibling because you share that history between the two of you. This could be the love of children, pets, things that have softened you, things that have ripened you, things that have afforded you a deeper and a broader emotional experience. This is also translating to the way that you exercise authority in your life. Before, it might have been eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, or it might have been fighting or confronting or going through difficult times and slogging on through. But right now, you may find that you're exercising a richer emotional authority in your life, that it's less retaliatory, that it's less angry, that it's less suspicious, This isn't to say that you've become more relaxed as an individual or lenient or looking the other way or complacent. No, not at all. But what it is to say is that the gentle effect of Pisces in your life might have opened up your heart, might have opened up your soul, and might have introduced an empathy that you're more conscious of. It's hard for you to look at things in a black and white way or just a good or bad way. You can see the areas of gray, or let's call them the areas of color. You've got black and you've got white, and then you have a whole polychromatic range or spectrum that goes between those two places. And this polychromatic spectrum has entered into your life, and it's moved you in ways, and you've grown as a result. You've matured as a result. So what you might find moving into a place of more authority in your life, and that we've talked about with Jupiter going over your midheaven, what you might find as you move into a place of that authority or parenting or the person that people come to is that you can't help but acknowledge the other side of the story. You can't help but acknowledge that people just don't do bad things for the sake of doing bad things, but that there's a history. There might be a reason why. They might be suffering from something that causes this that they're not in control of. Okay, not everyone in life is a bad egg. Now, do we have bad eggs? Yes. And if you're a Scorpio or Scorpio rising, you're going to ferret out those bad eggs. That's what you do. It's like searching for truffles, okay? But what I'm saying is that you've grown more compassionate, and you can't help but take into account what that background is. This is really important. This is especially important because you were born under a water sign. We are living in a new sky right now. The slower moving planets, and that's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the slower moving planets right now are all in fire and air signs. So things are burning with a different type of intensity. There's an accelerated pace. Things are happening really, really fast. They're picking up right away, and then they're wiping out just as fast. So we're living in this accelerated world, which isn't really a watery world. And so what that means is that you as a water sign are carrying the water. Okay. That means that you as a water sign are carrying the compassion. You as a water sign are carrying the emotional support, the bonding, the caring, the love of people, the understanding that people can go through very dark turns in their life. You carry the camaraderie, that beautiful Scorpio camaraderie, where you will go with someone through a dark time or a rough time. You will not leave them at the brink of the abyss. You will stand with them. You will stand beside them while they go through those difficulties. So in a world that can sometimes feel very dry and very barren or very heated and very incendiary, you are going to appear to people as an oasis. You are going to appear to people as a well of deep and beautiful and fresh water, a place where they can reside, a place where they feel protected, a place where they can restore and refresh, a place of emotional sustenance. And as a Scorpio, as a water sign, you have that to give. Another thing that Pisces teaches us is that our emotional lives are deeper than we know. They're even bottomless. When you remember that 3/4 of the world is covered by the ocean, okay, then you realize how much water is a part of our lives. And as a water sign, you carry that with you. You've been through the heartbreaks, you've been through the difficulties, and your heart has mended. And you've returned from the difficulties. You've been restored. It's just like the water cycle, where water falls from the clouds in the sky, and it falls onto the oceans and the ponds and the lakes. The sun comes out, it heats it up. The water evaporates, it goes back into the sky, it becomes clouds, and it begins its cycle again, where it rains and onto the oceans and the waters and the lakes again. So there's an unendingness to that emotional capacity that when you understand it, that you can call upon. Water signs have a natural instinctual feeling for this. And again, Scorpio, of all the water signs, is going to act like that water is scarce, that it's a scarce and valuable commodity. You know that it's not scarce. You know that it runs very deeply in you, but you don't want other people knowing that about you because you still want to come across as tough and tough-minded. But the fact of the matter is you carry that water with you, and people will be looking to you for emotional solace, comfort, recognition. They'll be looking to you as a creative collaborator. They'll be looking to you as someone who is a sponsor or a guide or a mentor, someone who protects and shelters their talent or their heart and helps them to become the best that they can possibly be in life, but in a very organic way, in a very life-giving way. And this is something that is very sacred to Scorpio. And if you let yourself think about it, it's something that you've also picked up from Pisces. So move from that place of emotional growth. Move from that place of emotional maturity. You don't need to be so hard and so tough as you have before in the past. Now, you can still act that way when you have to, but you don't need to be that way on the inside because you are now drawing from an emotional reservoir which is unlimited and will always refresh and restore you. If you're born under Sagittarius or you have Sagittarius rising, this lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to have a very profound impact on you. The lunar eclipse in Pisces is the last lunar eclipse in the Virgo Pisces eclipse cycle, something that's been ruling over your life for the last 1.5 to 2 years. And so what you might have experienced during this period of time is a profound change in both your home life and your career. Now, when I talk about a profound change in your home life and your career, you might have gone through a period of time in which focus on your career took you away from your home. That doesn't necessarily mean that it took you away from your home physically, although you might have had to physically leave your home because maybe you were on the road or traveling or had to relocate for work for a temporary period of time or something along those lines. A career might also have been a place that you could focus on because you were going through emotional difficulties, painful situations at home. You might not have felt at home in your home. And so if you look back at your last 1.5 to 2 years, you might have seen how dramatically that has changed. And it has probably changed for the better. You might have moved out of a home that you shared with someone, or a home that you shared with someone broke up because the two of you just weren't getting along anymore and might have been bringing out the worst in one another. Or you might have moved to follow a pursuit or an aspiration or in accordance to a job. Your job might have asked you to relocate to a different part of the country or a different part of the world. What's happening now is that you are returning home. Okay, you're returning to the idea of home, perhaps, is what I should really say. Because in the last 1.5 years, if we really look at this part of your solar horoscope where this lunar eclipse is taking place, this question of home or belonging in home or where do you fit or where do you belong has probably been going on in your life since about 2012 or 2013. Now, 2012 and 2013 is when Neptune first entered the zodiac sign of Pisces, and that part of your solar chart that's associated to the 4th house, which is the house of hearth, home, family, and roots. That might have been when you began to feel adrift, or like you couldn't feel the ground beneath your feet, that you didn't really know where you belonged, that you didn't have a sense of being rooted. Now, being born under Sagittarius or Sagittarius rising, that wouldn't have been an altogether bad feeling. You know, you were born under Jupiter, the planet of adventure and travel and long journeys, okay? So anything involved with going and finding yourself in the world would have been something that you very much embraced And it's something that you probably did with a lot of gusto at first. But what might have happened after a period of time is that you might have longed for that home that you left. Maybe traveling as part of work kept you away from home or family for sustained or long periods of time. Maybe that sense that you didn't really feel comfortable in your skin or comfortable in your home or relationship might have also been something that ate away at you. And so after a period of time when you're on the road or journeying for such a long period of time, you want to be able to come back home. You want to be able to find your family and your things where they used to be. Now, I don't know if you saw the film The Odyssey, but in the film The Odyssey, we have the story of Odysseus. Odysseus who goes off to fight in the Trojan War, and he's gone for 10 years. And after he has been on the side of the conquering army, which is the side of Greece, he tries to return home. He angers the god Poseidon, or Neptune. That's the Roman god's name, and that's who the planet Neptune is named after. He angers Poseidon, and Poseidon basically tacks on another 10 years to Odysseus being away from home. Okay, so there's the 10 years that he was fighting at the Trojan War, where he left his son Telemachus as an infant. Okay, there's the 10 years that he's there fighting the Trojan War, and then after the Greeks win, they're all returning home. But he pisses Poseidon off, and Poseidon's like, okay, you're going to do another 10 years away from home. And so Poseidon sends him on all of these misadventures at sea. Something that might not have been clear in the film, The Odyssey, is that Ithaca, which is the home of Odysseus, is no more than, I think, maybe 4 or 5 days' journey from Troy. So for Odysseus to have taken 10 years to find his way back home on a trip that typically would have been about 4 or 5 days of an ocean voyage, well, that just shows you how storm-tossed Odysseus's life was. And in a similar way, that might have been what was going on in your astrological chart, where you found yourself adrift, or you found yourself away from what felt like a home base. And again, part of you would have responded to the adventure of it, but then after a long period of time of being away, part of you might have longed for that home and wanting to return. And if the Odyssey is the story of anything, it's the story of a man trying to find his way home. It's no different from Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, who's trying to find her way back home after having been transported to an altogether different and foreign world. So what we're looking at here with the last lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces is you returning to home. Now, that might be your actual home. It might be your biological family or your family of choice. Maybe an apartment or a home that you haven't inhabited regularly for a very long and sustained time. That might be what's going on. But I kind of get the idea that it might be taking place on a deeper level, on a more profound level. That perhaps in all your journeying away from home, and this can be mentally or psychologically or psychically. You don't have to have actually physically left your home, but there might have been a part of you that, was sort of adrift or disconnected from home, that home was somewhere that you came home to at the end of the day and hung out, and then you went back to work on the next day, that you didn't really feel connected to. And maybe your work made you feel like you weren't connected to home. Again, it could have been a profession in which you were away for long periods of time, or it could have been a profession where you didn't really feel connected to it. What's happening right now with this return to home is this sense of really sort of putting your roots down again after having felt adrift for at least 1.5 to 3 years, and maybe potentially 12 to 13 years. You're finding your way to what's making you feel at home and happy in your life. Okay, this is what this lunar eclipse in Pisces is all about. It's brought you back home again through all of your journeys and all of your tests, travails, and odysseys, and experiences of wonder and experiences of dismay. So here you're taking up your life again. And obviously you're not going to be taking it up from where you had started out, but you're taking up your life again. Maybe you found your true calling. Maybe you found the place where you really want to live. Maybe you found the person that you really want to be with. What I see coming into your life is more of a feeling of peace and calm, more of a feeling of belonging, where you haven't perhaps experienced that belonging in a very long time. So this is where I see the lunar eclipse in Pisces leading you to the sense of place, the sense of taking root, the sense of this is where I belong. And as a Sagittarius or a Sagittarius rising, where you have felt so on the road or adrift for a long period of time, this is going to give you a very strong sense of peace and solace. And this is also going to give you a very strong sense of rootedness, something that you haven't experienced or felt in a very long time. If you're born under Capricorn or you have Capricorn rising, this lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces on August 28th is going to be a wonderful eclipse for you. The reason why it's going to be so good is because Pisces is a water sign, and you, as a Capricorn, were born under an earth sign. Earth and water get along. Earth and water complement one another. Now, in astrology, this is called a sextile. Sextiles are not the same thing as trines. Trines are when we're talking about three different signs that are joined together to one another through like element, the same element. So signs that trine signs would be, for instance, Taurus, which is an earth sign, trining Virgo, which is an earth sign, which trines Capricorn, which is an earth sign, etc. Or with water, it would be Cancer as a water sign, trining Scorpio, which is a water sign, and Pisces as a water sign, etc. They create this triangle of energy that continues, that never stops. It just keeps flowing through one sign and another. And so they join disparate zodiac signs, different zodiac signs through a like element. When you have earth and water forming an aspect to one another, that makes them complementary. With a trine energy, one sign says to the other sign, I love you, I'm in your corner, you do you, babe. I'm going to give you unconditional support. When you have a sextile, there's a complementary energy, but there are still two different ways of viewing the world. For instance, an earth sign views the world in terms of results. You know, it works really hard. It's very industrious. It wants to see results. And water signs like Pisces view the world through emotional contacts, emotional bonds. These are the things that are important. Now, a Capricorn has a strong emotional life, but that emotional life is going to take a backseat to its work, to its responsibilities, its obligations, to the things that need to be done. This is what Capricorn or a Capricorn rising will prioritize, and this is the focus of a Capricorn or a Capricorn rising. Now, for the past year and a half, at least, the argument could be made since about March 2023. During this period of time, you've had a lot of Pisces energy coming into your life. And what Pisces energy does is that it softens, all right? It's kind of like, well, think of the ocean and the ocean crashing on a beach, on a shore. You know, the tide comes in, the tide goes out, the waves curl and crash on the shore, and they flow back into the ocean again. And that's really delightful, and it's a lovely thing to walk next to in the afternoon or even at sunset, all right? But what's happening in the bigger picture or over a longer duration of time is that that ocean is shaping a coastline, all right? So the coastline that we had 100 years ago, maybe on the East Coast or the West Coast, isn't the same coastline that it is 100 years later. It's been shaped or reshaped in a way by the constant crashing of the waves on the shores. In a similar vein, the same thing has been happening to you. You might not have noticed yourself softening in any sort of dramatic way or sudden or surprise revelation, but you have been softening because of the energy of Pisces forming a sextile to your Capricorn. what you might have seen in the last 3 years or the last year and a half is a change in the way that you view work, in the change in the way that you view relationships. And it's not just your spousal relationship or your lover or your business partner. It's kind of the relationships outside of that. Maybe it's your neighbor. Maybe it's the people that you see at the community play or your house of worship, that there's more of an openness with you, that you're making yourself more available, that you're not so focused on work or being away from socializing because you're burning the midnight oil at work or keeping these impossible hours. That over this period of time that you might have come to value your conversations more than you have before. Now, that's kind of a funny word that I'm using there. Value your conversations more than you have before. But the sextile, which is the planetary aspect that's taking place between Pisces and Capricorn, it is a conversational aspect. Okay, it's where the two signs talk to one another. They're not entirely on the same page, but they're not at loggerheads either. One sign is saying to the other, I really want to support you in this, or I really see you doing this. I think it's great, but I don't think this one thing that you're doing is really going to serve you. Or did you think about maybe changing your approach or choosing a different way to try out this idea? This conversational tone between the zodiac signs has also shown up in your day-to-day life, where you are enjoying the company of people that you see. It might just be for 5 minutes. It might just be for 15 minutes, or it might be for a work day, but there's more give and take. You're open to their input. You share ideas. You really enjoy their company a lot. And so in keeping with this idea, you're more relaxed as a person. And by being more relaxed as a person, you might feel like you're more confident, that you don't have to work so hard, that you don't have to get those credentials, that you don't have to justify everything that you do, that you don't have to authenticate every comment that you make. You're kind of stepping away from footnoting your life, or conditioning different aspects of your life, or always having to have an explanation for something. And you're getting more into the ease and flow of life. Now, you might still be working, very demanding hours. That would not be a surprise to me if I'm talking to a Capricorn or Capricorn rising, but there may be more joy in it. It may be less alone. It may be with more people. Capricorns have a reputation for sort of being like a desert father, and back in the day, the desert fathers were basically the desert hermits. They were holy men and sometimes holy women who would leave the company of the other townspeople, and they would live in a cave. They would live apart from society. They would live on their own, and they would contemplate great things. And what would happen is that the people from the town would come looking for them, okay? And they would come looking for these desert fathers, and in some case, desert mothers, because these were holy people who could give sage advice, who could bring insight, who could settle a dispute or a feud that maybe a judge or a Pharisee couldn't. And so they would come looking for these holy people and want to sit in their presence. And of course, the hermits would be all kinds of disgruntled and annoyed and cranky. And they would be like, oh, they found me. And they would pick up their things, at nighttime and move to another cave or something like that. And of course, the townspeople would come in search of them and find them somewhere. So that might have been the story of your life for the past few years, where you wanted to be alone to do your work and to think your great thoughts, or you didn't want to work with the other teams at the corporation because you were taking meetings about meetings and it was a waste of time. And you might have even been a bit cranky about it, but nevertheless, people came seeking your advice and your guidance and your counsel, and you might have seen them as interrupting things. You were doing your work or a train of thought or really focused on things, or maybe you were like, I have to explain this to these people who can't track anything, or who are on their cell phones, But what's happened with this Pisces Capricorn mix of energies is that maybe there's more humor about it. Maybe you enjoy that they're coming and finding you. Maybe you enjoy kind of coming out of your cave and talking to them. And maybe you're feeling this sense of community or belonging in some way. And this is not only mellowing you, but this also poses a creative challenge for you. How do you take those things that you've pondered in your solitude and apply them to the traffic of day-to-day life? So in the past year and a half or 3 years, maybe number of years, because Neptune was in Pisces for a long time too, maybe you've become less precious about your thoughts and feelings and your work. Maybe you've become more open to collaboration. Maybe you enjoy spending time visiting with people and conversing with people, and you don't see it as something that was taking you away from work or that was a waste of your time. So if that's the case, if that's something you can relate to, then that means that the Pisces energy has done its work. You've come to the end of your Pisces curriculum. You've learned the things that you've needed to learn, which is to be with others, to apply the things that you discover in the solitude of yourself to your everyday life, that you don't need to separate work from home or work from people or work from good manners. And as a result, you become a wiser and more accessible and a more personable person. This is really important because we're moving into a period of time in which we're living under a new sky. All of the slow-moving planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they're now in fire and air signs. And so this is why everyone feels like they're on all the time, or that we're living life at an accelerated pace, and that we're even living in a world of incendiary topics and disputes and feuds and things like this. As a Capricorn or a Capricorn rising, you need to carry that earth and water energy with you. You need to be a place where people feel grounded. You need to be a place where people feel sheltered. You need to be a place where you are holding a space that everyone can come and be in and find peace away from what is a very hectic world. So what's kind of ironic here is that you're learning to become more accessible in the wisdom and the skills and the things that you have to teach in a very hectic world, but you're also teaching people to live in their own time. Remember that your ruling planet Saturn is the planet of time, and you don't have to be in anyone else's hurry. And that is not the worst thing that you could teach people in life nowadays, that they don't have to be in anyone else's hurry, and that you take things in your own time. And this is something that people are really going to look to you for in leadership, in guidance, in mentorship. And this is also something that people are going to treasure about you, that you stand out, not because you're running ahead of the pack or yelling louder than anyone else, but you're standing out because you show that patience and taking things in your own time allows you to live a more wholesome and holistic life. If you're born under Aquarius or you have Aquarius rising, this lunar eclipse taking place in the zodiac sign of Pisces on August 28th is your last sort of touching base with the past before you move into your future. Now, the eclipse cycle this year in 2026 has switched from Pisces and Virgo to Aquarius and Leo. Indeed, we had a solar eclipse in Aquarius around your birthday, and then there was a recent solar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Leo. And these are two zodiac signs that impact you personally and powerfully. But there is what you are leaving behind. There is kind of what you've moved past. There's what came before. And this is what this lunar eclipse in Pisces on August 28th is all about. Certain things have happened this year that have changed the direction of your life dramatically. Maybe they were sudden and out of the blue, or maybe they were deliberate, things that you really thought about and contemplated for a long time. And this year you announced them. You decided to act on them. So what's happening right now is that you're moving in a new direction in your life. All right, you're going basically where no Aquarian or Aquarius rising has gone before. And this might have been as a result of circumstances, or this might have been a result of you wanting something new in your life, you wanting to travel a new or different path than the one that you've traveled before. But it didn't just take place this year, and it's not going to take place this year or take place even now, this new adventure in a different direction. It looks like you still have about a year of transition that's going. So it might be something like maybe you're at a job and you're at a job for 6 more months, or you're at a job for another year. Maybe you've purchased a new home, but you still have to stay where you are because of work or some sort of commitment for a longer period. Or maybe you're going to begin this new path, but you have obligations and responsibilities that still have to be fulfilled. And this is essentially what this lunar eclipse in Pisces is all about. But it's also about you leaving something secure to seek out something new. And during this period of time, you might be a little bit uncomfortable with this energy. You might be uncomfortable with this energy because the longer that you're staying in an old situation, or you're transitioning from a new to an old situation back and forth, the more time you might have to have second thoughts, or to wonder if this was really the right decision for you to make. Or it might simply be more time of you feeling frustrated because you're not allowed to completely embrace this new direction that you want to go in, and you're still stuck taking care of loose ends, tying up loose ends or taking care of old business. What I would recommend with working with this energy is to sort of tap into your Saturnian side. Aquarius is ruled by 2 planets, Saturn and Uranus. Uranus we're pretty familiar with because Uranus is the planet of revolution and change, and Aquarians are often described as being revolutionary or the rebel. Actually, Aquarians are a composite of the two. They're a composite of Saturn and Uranus. They're as much revolution and change as they are history and legacy and the way that things have been done before. And this is one of the great predicaments in the Aquarian psyche. And it's also the thing that gives Aquarians their genius, their innovation, and their invention. So here you might find yourself still having to deal with old business and old things and not really being able to have your free flight forward. But what I want you to do is, as I said before, tap into that Saturn. Take care of the old business. Tie up the loose ends. Say to yourself, I'm not at that point where I can fly free yet. There are certain responsibilities or obligations that I have to take care of. And give yourself over to that voluntarily. Let yourself live in the time that you're living in right now, which is a time of taking care of loose ends and taking care of old business. Because the more loose ends that you tie up and the more old business that you take care of, the more knowledge is still being imparted to you. You're still building your knowledge. You're still building your resources. You're still building your momentum even to go in this new direction. The time for that new direction isn't quite yet, but it is approaching. So instead of getting caught up in the future, or instead of getting caught up of where you want to be, adopt a kind of Zen mindset, that I'm going to be here now, and I'm going to take care of the things that I need to take care of now. That will give a wonderful feeling of closure. That will give a wonderful feeling of completion. But what you also get out of this is more of an organic transition from what you're winding up to what you are beginning anew. And organic transitions are good because you don't feel like, if you're fast out of the gate, that you have to keep that momentum going. You don't feel like you're running to play catch up with what's already set in motion. What it does is that it orients you in your own sense of time. One of your planets is Saturn, which is the planet of time in astrology. It gets you connected to your own sense of time so that you're doing things in your own time, so that when you make that transition from where you've been to where you're going, it's a transition that not only will you be making successfully, but it's this transition that won't feel hurried or harried. It will feel organic. It will feel like it's you. And it will take place at that time that it was meant to take place in. If you're born under Pisces or you have Pisces rising, this lunar eclipse taking place in your zodiac sign on August 28th is going to be a very profound and fulfilling experience for you. Not only are you coming to the end of a 1.5 or 2-year cycle of eclipses in Virgo and Pisces and the North Node moving through Pisces, but you're also coming to an end of a period of time that began with Saturn entering your zodiac sign in March of 2023. And you're also coming to the end of a period of time that could be argued that began in 2012 and 2013 when Neptune, your modern ruler, entered your own zodiac sign. What that means is that you're completing what could be a 13-year curriculum of you becoming you. People often joke about people born under Pisces or having Pisces rising as being spaced out or touchy-feely or from another planet or just, too fragile for this world, like a Blanche Dubois who's clinging to her Chinese lantern. Okay, so that's not really Pisces. Pisces has a real strength and Pisces has a real fortitude. But Pisces is also a mutable sign. It changes, just like the ocean that your ruling planet Neptune is named after changes. And so you have your up times and your down times, your high tides, your low tides, your storms at sea, and your calm oceans. Okay, so all of this is what you've experienced through a prolonged period of time. And during this period of time, you might have felt like you were adrift, or you were meandering, and being a Pisces or a Pisces rising, you probably didn't mind that too much because Pisces like the idea of going with the flow or moving along the current of events. But at some point you begin to wonder, where is this all leading? All right. And that's pretty much where this lunar eclipse in your zodiac sign on August 28th has delivered you. You have fulfilled your Piscean curriculum. You've learned everything that there is to know about being a Pisces in your good times, your bad times, your periods of ecstasy, and your periods of agony. So you're feeling very much connected to who you are. You're feeling very much connected to your own zodiac sign. But you've also been through a transformation during this period. Remember how earlier in the forecast I was talking about how lunar eclipses can be associated to clearing away the dead wood in your life, clearing away the dead wood in order to make room for new growth? Another image that I used was a snake shedding its skin. And the reason why a snake sheds its skin is because its body grows, but its skin doesn't. So this is why it sheds the skin, that it's grown out of the skin. It's grown bigger than the skin, so the skin shreds and falls apart, and the snake grows into its new body and also grows a new skin. Well, a similar image of metamorphosis that I want to use with you is the butterfly leaving its cocoon. Okay, back in 2013 or 2012, if you want to go the whole long distance, but at least since 2023, you might have felt like you had been cocooning, that you were a caterpillar and that you had gone into a cocoon and there you had stayed. And so this might have been a period of what they call a chrysalis. Now, we're led to believe that a chrysalis, you go into a cocoon and you just stay in that cocoon until you emerge as a butterfly. But the fact of the matter is, we don't really know what takes place in that cocoon. All right. There's a period of time where it just looks like a cocoon. It's kind of like a drab color. But then the color begins to disappear in the cocoon and we begin to see the wings and colors of the butterfly that's underneath it. We don't know if the caterpillar went into a coma during that period of time or whether the caterpillar has been awake during that period of time and experiencing legs grow longer and wings coming out of its back. Okay, we don't know if that's kind of like a pleasurable spa experience or if that's an experience of painful transformation. We don't know. What we do know is that when the butterfly emerges from the cocoon, it's not a creature that is land-based and has to climb up on branches and crawl on the ground or crawl up a bush or the branch of a tree, we know that it flies, that it's given complete flight. And one can't help but wonder, is that in its DNA? Is that in its instinct? Does it know that it's going to become a butterfly one day? Or is that just its new self and it just knows how to fly? You know, we don't really know the interior life of a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. And that's kind of what I want to share with you about your own experience. You didn't probably have the clearest idea of what you're transforming into or how your life was going to change. But now with the lunar eclipse, the last lunar eclipse of this particular Virgo Pisces eclipse cycle taking place on August 28th, and it coming at the end of the North Node having moved through your sign, and it coming at the end of so many slow-moving planets moving through your sign, this really is a new world for you. It's a fresh world, but it's not the world of a naive. It's a world where you will be calling upon your experience, where you'll be calling upon everything that has come before in your life. And so what this last lunar eclipse in your sign is doing is it's getting you to emerge from the cocoon. It's getting you to spread your wings and to have that feeling of being in a different body, of having a wingspan, that feeling of flight, and even feeding on something that was different than something that you fed on before. And so this is what I want you to embrace, that this sense of transformation isn't a transformation of your external circumstances. It's not a transformation of your destiny. It's not something you went out to become. It's something that has grown organically out of who you are. And so this release that you may feel in your life is an inner release. And it's not the inner release that comes from giving yourself permission or taking away prohibitions. It's a release that comes from growing into. So what this lunar eclipse, this last lunar eclipse in the Virgo Pisces cycle taking place on August 28th, is that it's heralding who you have grown into. And so you're stepping out into the world, this person that you've grown into, someone that you might have known consciously or known just from the gut that you felt in your gut all along you really were. This is the person you've grown into. This is what you have fulfilled. And this is your rebirth. And this is the beginning steps of a new chapter in your life.